photograph shouldn't exist. It was taken in 1979, for years before asterisk Daniel Mercer officially came into existence. Yet there he was, leaning casually against a pickup truck outside a roadside diner in Medford, Oregon. Same narrow face, same faint scar above the left eyebrow, same eyes, and standing beside him, smiling as if nothing in the world was wrong, was a woman who had vanished 3 days later. Her name was Lila Brooks. For more than 40 years, no one had ever connected that photograph to the man known as Daniel Mercer. Because, on paper, Daniel Mercer did not exist in 1979. According to every official record, his life began in 1983. By the time Daniel Mercer settled in Bozeman, Montana, he was already in his early 30s. He bought a modest pale blue house at the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac. He took a job that required no scrutiny. He kept to himself in a way that felt polite, not secretive. People trusted him instinctively. He volunteered at the community pantry, helped shovel snow for elderly neighbors, attended town meetings without ever speaking too much or too little. Daniel was the kind of man who blended so completely into the background that people assumed they'd known him forever. But no one actually had. No childhood stories no high school memories no old friends dropping by unexpectedly. When someone finally asked where he was from, Daniel smiled and said, "I moved around a lot back then." That answer worked for decades because no one had a reason to doubt him, until one person did. Ethan Cole wasn't looking for Daniel Mercer. He wasn't even looking for Bozeman. Ethan was a genealogist, a professional researcher who traced lost family lines and unresolved histories. Most of his cases involved immigration records, forgotten adoptions, or inheritance disputes. This one started with a missing man from Oregon, last documented in the late 1970s. The trail was cold, until Ethan noticed something that didn't make sense. A birth certificate had been amended, not reissued. That distinction mattered. Amendments were rare in that era, and this one wasn't correcting a spelling mistake or clerical error. It had replaced an entire identity. The original name was gone. In its place, Daniel Mercer. The amendment date? Ethan arrived in Bozeman in January 2021, when winter turned the town into a frozen still life. Snowbank sidewalks, wind that burned the lungs, streets so quiet they echoed. Inside the Gallatin County Records office, Ethan requested archive amendments from the late 70s through early 80s. The clerk hesitated. "Those files don't get requested much." "They shouldn't," Ethan replied calmly. "But this one should." When the file arrived, Ethan knew instantly he wasn't dealing with coincidence. The formatting was outdated but precise. The ink matched official documents of the time. Whoever altered the record had known exactly what they were doing and had access to do it cleanly. This wasn't identity theft. It was identity replacement. That night, alone in his motel room, Ethan followed Daniel Mercer's history backward, and then it disappeared. No medical records before 1983.NO education history. NO driver's license renewals. Nothing. It was as if Daniel Mercer had stepped fully formed into existence in his early 30s. Ethan had seen this before. Witness protection, rare immigration anomalies, but those cases always left footprints. Daniel left none, until Ethan opened a dusty archive of local newspapers from Medford, Oregon, and found the photograph. The image was grainy but unmistakable. A man leaning against a pickup truck outside a diner late at night. A woman beside him, smiling mid-laugh, unaware she was being photographed. The caption read, "Local late-night crowd outside Pine Ridge Diner, June 1979. Ethan's breath caught. The man was Daniel Mercer. Not similar, not resembling. Identical. Same scar, same posture, same expression. The woman's name was listed 2 pages later. Lila Brooks, missing. Last seen leaving the same diner 3 days after the photograph was taken. Witnesses reported she got into a pickup truck driven by a man she seemed to know. The man gave a name to police. It turned out to be false. The case had gone nowhere. No bodied, no arrest, no follow-up. By the early 1980s, Lila Brooks had become another cold case, another unanswered question, in a system already overloaded. Except Ethan was now staring at a man who hadn't just escaped suspicion. He'd escaped existence. Over the next 48 hours, Ethan worked without sleep. He traced addresses, employment stubs, temporary jobs across Washington and Oregon in the late 1970s. Daniel, under different names, never stayed anywhere long. And wherever he did stay, someone went missing soon after. Not always reported, not always investigated, but always close. Ethan mapped the locations on his laptop. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't a man running from something. This was a man hiding in motion. On the third night, Ethan returned to his motel after dinner. The door was ajar. He froze. Inside, the room had been searched. Papers scattered. Drawers pulled out. His laptop still there, but open, his files accessed. And one thing was missing: the photograph. The only physical proof linking Daniel Mercer to Lila Brooks. Ethan's phone vibrated. Unknown number. He answered, breathing, then a calm voice. "You're looking at the wrong pass," the voice said, "and you should stop." The line went dead. Ethan stood motionless, understanding what the police had never realized. Daniel Mercer wasn't hiding anymore. He was watching. In the next moments, the investigation turns official, and Ethan learns why this case was quietly ignored for decades and how dangerous it is to resurrect the truth. If this story unsettles you, it should. Like this video so more people see it. Subscribe, because this is where the truth gets dangerous. Do you believe Daniel Mercer was hiding or hunting? Drop a comment below, because what comes next proves this secret didn't stay buried by accident. By the time Ethan Cole contacted police, he already knew two things. First, this wasn't a misunderstanding. Second, someone had decided long ago that the truth about Daniel Mercer was inconvenient. Ethan didn't walk into the Bozeman Police Department waving theories or emotions. He brought documentation, timelines, archived employment records, cross-state address histories, and a written summary that began with a sentence impossible to ignore. Daniel Mercer did not exist before 1983. The man using that name existed under multiple identities in the Pacific Northwest during the late 1970s. The detective assigned to him, Lieutenant Mark Hensley, listened in silence. Hensley was a 25-year veteran, measured, skeptical, visibly tired of internet-fueled suspicions. But when Ethan slid over the fingerprint comparison, Hensley stopped tapping his pen. The prints matched perfectly. 2 names point 2 lives point 1 man. Hensley leaned back in his chair. "You're saying this guy didn't just disappear?" He restarted. "I'm saying," Ethan replied, "someone helped him do it." Within 48 hours, the case was quietly reopened, not as a homicide, but as a historical identity fraud review. That distinction mattered. It kept the press away. It kept Daniel unaware. At least that was the hope. But hope had nothing to do with what came next. Investigators began where no one had looked before. Why the case was dropped so quickly. Lila Brooks' disappearance had been classified as voluntary absence after only 3 months. No body, no evidence of struggle, no political pressure. Except Ethan found something buried in a supplemental report, a note written by a junior officer in 1980. Subject of interest provided false personal details. Request for extended questioning denied. Denied by whom? The signature above the denial belonged to a supervisor who had retired years ago and died shortly after. The trail was old, but not cold. Meanwhile, Daniel Mercer noticed change. The patrol car that drove by his street twice in one afternoon. The unfamiliar face at the grocery store that looked away too slowly. The sudden silence from a local official he'd known for years. Daniel didn't panic. He never did. Instead, he adjusted. He stopped volunteering. Changed his routine, stayed inside after dark, and he made a phone call he hadn't made in decades. Back in the station, Hensley authorized a background sweep that went deeper than any Daniel had faced before. And what came back disturbed everyone involved. Inconsistencies across states. Temporary Social Security numbers, employer records that vanished mid-decade, and most troubling of all, sealed federal annotations. Not classified, not redacted, just inaccessible. That didn't happen by accident. Ethan pushed harder. He revisited the women connected to Daniel's earlier identities, not as missing persons, but as patterns. Women in their mid-20s, service jobs, late-night shifts, on transit routes Daniel had traveled. Some vanished. Others relocated abruptly, leaving behind jobs, friends, and family. Too abruptly. One woman, Mary Ann Keller, had reported a stalking incident in 1981. Her description of the man matched Daniel exactly. The case was marked unsubstantiated. Mary Ann was now living in Arizona. Alive. Ethan called her. She recognized the photograph immediately. Her voice cracked. "That's him," she said. "I told them. I told the police. He followed me for weeks. He knew where I worked, where I lived." "What happened?" Ethan asked. "They told me I was imagining things, that I was stressed, and then one day he was gone." Mary Ann paused, but I wasn't relieved. I was scared. "Why?" "Because men like that don't stop," she said. "They just learn." That was when Hensley realized something critical. Daniel Mercer hadn't just slipped through the system. He had been filtered, some cases dismissed, some witnesses minimized, some files quietly buried. Not because Daniel was powerful, but because the system didn't want to admit it had failed. The decision was made to bring Daniel in, not for arrest, for conversation, a routine inquiry. Daniel arrived calm, polite, cooperative. He answered questions easily about his job, his neighbors, his life in Bozeman. Then Hensley slid a photo across the table. Not Lila Brooks, a different one. Daniel didn't react. "Do you recognize him?" Hensley asked. Daniel tilted his head, studied the image, smiled faintly. "No," he said. "Should I?" The photo was of Daniel himself, under a different name. The room went quiet. "That's you," Hensley said. Daniel leaned back, folded his hands. "You'd be surprised how many people look alike," he replied. That was the moment Hensley knew. This man had rehearsed this conversation for decades. The interview ended without charges, but Daniel didn't go home. Instead, he drove, without explanation, toward the Oregon border. And when authorities obtained a warrant to search his Bozeman property, they found something that shifted the case from suspicion to terror. Behind Daniel's detached shed was a patch of ground that didn't freeze properly. The soil was disturbed. Recently, underneath, investigators uncovered a sealed metal container. Inside were not trophies, not weapons, not photographs. They were lists, names, dates, cities, some crossed out, some circled, some with nothing beside them at all. 13 names. One of them was Lila Brooks. Another was still alive, and the final name had today's date written beside it. In the next moments, the truth surfaces, and Daniel Mercer finally explains what the lists mean if authorities can stop him in time. What would you do if you discovered your name on a list you were never meant to see? Would you run, or would you wait and hope you were wrong? If you haven't already, subscribe now, because this final chapter reveals why Daniel Mercer didn't just hide his past. He curated it. When investigators realized one of the names on the list was still alive and marked with today's date, the case escalated from historical investigation to an active threat. This was no longer about what Daniel Mercer had done. It was about what he was about to do. Authorities moved fast, but Daniel moved faster. His vehicle was flagged crossing into Idaho just after dawn. By the time state troopers located it, the car was abandoned near a rest stop. Engine cold, keys still inside. Daniel had vanished again, but this time he hadn't erased his trail. He'd left it behind on purpose. The surviving name on the list belonged to Rachel Monroe, a 29-year-old travel nurse currently working a temporary assignment in Spokane, Washington. She fit the pattern. Service industry, transit schedule, minimal local connections. And she had no idea who Daniel Mercer was. When officers reached her by phone, she laughed nervously. "You've got the wrong person," she said. "I don't know anyone by that name." But when they described him, his voice, his mannerisms, the scar above his eyebrow, she went silent. "There's a man," she said slowly, Who's been showing up where I work? He always seems familiar, like we've met before. They hadn't, but Daniel had met her, weeks earlier, under another name. As law enforcement scrambled to secure Rachel, Ethan was called back in. They needed context, not evidence, meaning Ethan studied the list again, this time differently. The crossed-out names weren't victims. They were endings, lives Daniel had decided were finished, either through disappearance, fear, or death. The circled names, those were unfinished. Rachel's name wasn't circled. It was underlined, once, hard. Rachel was moved to a safe location, and that's when Daniel called, not the police. "Ethan, I wondered how long it would take you to understand." Daniel said calmly, "You're good at patterns, better than the rest." Ethan's hands trembled. "What do you want?" Daniel paused. "To be seen," he said, "before I'm erased again." Against protocol, the call was traced. Daniel was still in Washington, near Spokane, and he was waiting. They found him standing at the edge of a Forest Service road, hands visible, face relaxed, almost relieved. When agents cuffed him, Daniel didn't resist. In the interrogation room, he didn't ask for a lawyer. He asked for a mirror. "I just want to know," he said, studying his reflection, "if I still look like the man they never caught." Daniel confessed to one murder. Only one, Lila Brooks. "She saw something she shouldn't have," he said, "and she wouldn't forget it." When asked about the others, he smiled faintly. "I didn't hurt all of them," he said. "Some of them just needed to disappear, like I did." But the list? Hensley pressed. "What was it?" Daniel leaned forward. "A record," he said, "of control." Before investigators could extract more, Daniel collapsed. A concealed toxin, slow-acting, undetectable until too late, had been ingested hours earlier. By the time he reached the hospital, it was already over. Daniel Mercer died without revealing the full truth. The lists were released to cold case units across 3 states. Some families finally got answers. Others got something worse. Confirmation without closure. And one name on the list remains unresolved, its status unknown, crossed out, or simply waiting. So here's the question that refuses to go away. Was Daniel Mercer a lone predator? Or did the system teach him how to hide? If this case stayed with you, don't walk away from it. Subscribe now. These stories don't end when the video does. And the next one is already unfolding. Because some truths only surface when people are paying attention. And this channel exists to make sure they never get buried again.